We'll be live in 1 minute. Live in 1 minute. Here we go. Well, this should be it. I don't know. I can't hear anything duplexing from the studio, but welcome to X Squared Radio. We're coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is the America Free Radio studio with the Revolution Radio Network on freedomslips.com. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains through the America Free Radio studios on the Revolution Radio Network on freedomslips.com. This is the largest listener-supported radio network. I encourage you to go to revolutionradio.com or freedomslips.com, hit the donate button, and contribute. Listen, NPR gets a little bit of your check every single Friday. We don't get any unless you volunteer to do it. And that's how this network keeps the lights on. So we encourage you to contribute. All right, let's get right to it. We have only 2 hours and a lot to go over. We're also coming to you live on YouTube Live at my channel, which is Brooks Agnew. So those of you that subscribe to me, please also subscribe to the Revolution Radio Network, because this is where this program is originating. And I will try to keep tabs on the chat room and acknowledge you guys as you come in. Hi, Terry. Hi, David. Sunday, we broke some records. Wow, I couldn't believe how many people came in. Let's get going with this, because we're talking about Operation Corona Scare. And now we're talking about the end game. We kind of know how it started. We kind of know how it proliferated. We know how it got covered up so it could get a good start. We also know that some information leaked out about how it was going to work, and some people took some preemptive action, which saved a lot of people. But now we're talking about the end game. So once you understand the globalist mindset, the Global Syndicate, almost everything they do becomes rather robotic and rather predictable. And that's why you listen to this program, so that if you're sheltering in place, or you're in quarantine, or your company is closed down for a couple of weeks, or your visitation is being limited by your city or your town, you need to understand you've got to listen to this program tonight so you know what to do and you know where to stand, and you won't go do something stupid like buy a pickup truck load of toilet paper. That is just silliness, okay? It should not be surprising that the World Health Organization, a branch of the United Nations, has been so aggressive in cheerleading for the Chinese government and is responsible for the coronavirus outbreak. All right, trying to see what we have here. Oh, that's interesting. Just checking out some messages that came in. Sometimes they flash up in the middle of the program, and we have a variety of ways people can get a hold of me during the program. After all, China's communist surveillance state model is a beta test for the type of centralization that the UN wants for the entire planet. Yes? And this is what the Global Syndicate wants. They want their planet back. They were losing their planet. The Trump economy was taking their planet away from them. It was running away from them. The stock market was too strong. The Roaring '20s was going great. The middle class was doing great things. Every restaurant was breaking records. Every retailer was breaking records. Every manufacturing plant was breaking records. They can't have that. That's not what they want. Okay? They certainly aren't going to point out that it was China's totalitarian system that allowed the outbreak to spread from the very beginning. You can't even pass down the street with a scowl on your face, let alone share some bad news, because that's not the way the Chinese system works. So even now, President Xi Jinping is trying to rewrite history, claiming that he had been swift in responding to the crisis more than a month before he actually did. The lie that the coronavirus mutated naturally in a food and animal market in Wuhan continues to be peddled by the mainstream media, even though there is zero evidence that's credible supporting this claim. Oh, it comes from, the Washington Post, or it comes from some expert that they took from another liberal organization. They're all saying, oh, no, it was a natural virus. No, it wasn't. We know early on this thing was designer drug or designer virus. China is still releasing rigged death and infection numbers while they have over 600 million people under martial law lockdown, and their crematoriums continue pumping out fumes of the dead 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Brave health workers like Li Wenliang, who was punished by the government for warning about the virus in December, have died in the process of trying to fight against the centralized behemoth just to get vital information to the world. But that never happened, right? It was actually President Xi and the CPC that saved the day. Oh, the World Health Organization and the CPC say so, right? You'll never hear the UN praise the efforts of Li Wenliang. They want his name to disappear down the memory hole as much as the Chinese government does. The developing narrative is a familiar one. Local officials stifled the response to the outbreak, while the centralized national leadership put things back on track with extreme control measures, quarantine measures, blocks on movement, shot and published videos of disinfecting trucks driving down the street, fogging both sides of the street, people in hazmat outfits, cleaning sidewalks and spraying down gates and things like that. All these very professional videos going out. This is what was being done to put things back on track in the Hubei province they basically turned it into a veritable internment camp. Now, whatever you do, don't point out that it was the national government's habit of imprisoning health officials that released false information that led to the delayed reaction of the coronavirus. Don't point that out like we did here on this program. Don't do that. Also, don't point out that ground zero for the outbreak is just down the road from the largest level 4 biohazards lab in Asia. Don't point that out either, like we did 4 weeks ago here, because that would make you a conspiracy theorist. The message being pounded into the public consciousness every minute of the day is clear. You shut the hell up, and you accept that centralization works. Even when it is failing miserably, it still is the answer to our problems. All we have to do is adjust the historical record a little bit every time the system breaks, and then institute even more centralization in response. In other words, if the interdependent and draconian top-down structure of the globalist state leads to crisis, then it is because it was not centralized enough. Centralization always begets more centralization. History has shown us that over and over again. The financial fascist system of central banking and corporate oligarchy, it leads to the socialist welfare state. And the socialist welfare state leads to the surveillance state. And the surveillance state leads to the martial law state. And the martial law state leads to the full-on global governance state. An endless, elitist empire from which the only escape is blood. The failings of centralization have caused numerous problems long before it led to a potential pandemic. Why do you think the founding fathers set this up as a republic instead of a democracy? Because they didn't want the central government. They wanted the people to rule the government, not the other way around. So the pandemic, all it really does for us, and the way it's been treated, by the way, because it's not really a pandemic. It isn't. It just isn't, okay? Diarrhea is more of a pandemic. Hemorrhoids are more of a pandemic than this thing is. The pandemic and the way it's been treated simply clarifies this issue. For example, the breakdown in the global supply chain is becoming a bigger threat by the day. I know this. I'm in the manufacturing business. At our plant, right now, we have about 1,800 employees, getting ready to hire 500 more. Why? Because business is good. Business is really good. The problem is we can't get parts. Why can't we get parts? Because the tools to make those parts are tied up in China. We're trying to get our schedule back on schedule, and we're having a difficult time doing that. And now everyone is. Everyone is. The Baltic Dry Index. This is the measure of shipping containers that move at sea. Okay, the Baltic Dry Index. It measures shipping rates as well as the global demand for goods. It is essentially nothing. It is flatlined. That means empty decks, empty shipping containers. Nothing is moving. And this should have been the first warning sign that the supply chain was in trouble. It ain't just toilet paper. I'm not talking about stuff inside the United States or from Mexico and Canada. The continent is fine. Trucks are moving just like they normally are. Traffic is just as heavy today as it was a month ago. And cabbage is coming in, and corn is coming in, and cranberries are coming in, all that stuff. It's just the Baltic Dry Index, just the stuff at sea, okay? That's where we're having the trouble. That's what's impacting the supply chain. Now, enter Apple, one of the largest companies in the world, which now has abandoned its projects for 2020, and finally admitted that the shutdown of Chinese factories may just be a problem. They're going to miss their earnings projections for 2020. What has this done? It has spooked the stock market. The stock market still has earnings. Sales are still going on. People are buying stuff like crazy. The problem is that the market suspects that, okay, things are fine now, but in a month they're not going to be fine, so I'm going to take my money out now. And of course, I didn't do that. What I did is I waited with my cash, and I waited until I saw 75 and 80% discounts on the stocks that I like to buy, and I moved in and I bought them. And I made 15% on my money already this week. Am I a shameless capitalist? Hell yes, I am. I used my own personal money, and I took advantage of the fools out there that were spooked. I'm smart. You're smart. We're both able to do that. So it isn't about iPhones, people. I got one right here. I'm trying to get you to think about the bigger picture. Globalism has led to economies massively dependent upon cheap labor of China. They strategically created redundancies in production. This is what they did. They said, why make it there when you can make it here cheaper, and we will deliver it to you on time and the quality will be passable. And you know what? Companies said, you know what the optimum number of employees is, right? 0. Yeah, it's 0. If all my employees are in China, guess what I don't have to provide? Let's see. Unemployment insurance. Yeah. Overtime pay. Nope, don't have to provide that either. Let's see. Unemployment insurance. Don't have to provide that. I don't have to hold out taxes. Gee, this is great. I don't have any complaints. I don't have anybody late to work. All I have is my stuff. It arrives on time by truck. I put it in my stores and I sell it. And guess what? Instead of having to spend $18 to sell a polo shirt in Walmart, I can spend $7 and sell a shirt in Walmart. What's not to like? It's exactly what China said too. It's exactly what they said. And we have been forced to rely on production centers on the other side of the world for a vast majority of our goods. Drugs, steel, integrated circuits, tools, and the list goes on and on and on. They buy virtually nothing from us. Nothing. It was $500 to $800 billion a year. We were buying from them, and they were buying nothing from us. We didn't sell cars over there. We didn't sell airplanes over there. We didn't sell trucks over there. You don't see Ford F-150s driving around Beijing. They're Dongfeng trucks. Some of the people are going to argue about this, okay? But here's the reality. When China shuts down, which it has, our economy loses almost 20% of its supply chain. It just does. Everything from toothpaste to injection molds to bearings. When Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Vietnam shut down from the virus, you can add another 10, 15% on top of that. Retailers that sell these products in the United States, like AutoZone, like O'Reilly's, like Advance, like Napa, like all those jobbers that sell Chinese parts and Taiwanese parts and Japanese parts, in the U.S., they represent around 70% of our gross domestic product. Now, you cut off the supply chain in Asia, and retailers here lose a vast array of goods to sell. The U.S. economy eventually shuts down also, even if the virus never spreads here, because essentially it hasn't. It hasn't. More people have hemorrhoids than have this virus. Some people will argue that we don't need all the cheap plastic crap from Asia anyway, and this situation is a good thing. Well, I'm sorry to break it to you, Earth explorers, but America's economy is built on selling cheap plastic crap because sometimes that's all people can afford, and they go shopping for it. They buy cheap clothes. They buy cheap tools. They want cheap drugs. along with the selling of the fiat dollar as the world reserve currency. Walmart, we sometimes call them China Mart, but I've got two relatives that work at Walmart. I don't have any problem with the organization. It is the largest employer in the United States. It's probably the largest employer in the world, after all. Now, right or wrong, our economic system is so globalized that the fall of the Chinese dominoes will eventually knock down our own dominoes. My local Walmart, right here, just 3 miles away from here, closed at 11 p.m. last night for the first time since it was built. But when this disaster occurs and numerous national economies suffer from enforced globalist integration, guess what will happen next? The globalists will ride to our rescue with even greater centralization. This was their agenda all along. This was the end game from the very beginning. Many people are aware of the Event 21 or 201 simulation. You remember that? We talked about it a little bit on this program a couple of weeks ago. A war game run by globalists in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum on theoretical coronavirus pandemic that kills, I think they estimated 65 million people. Didn't happen. I'm just saying this was the war game. We played some of the tape for you on here. I posted the video online. This simulation took place only a couple months before the real thing. I think it took place in August. Before this thing really exploded in China in December. But hey, maybe that's just a coincidence. But I don't think so, because the language was the same, the disease was the same, the end outcome that a lot of the experts on their panel, and they were from all over the place. They were from Australia, they were from England, they were from the United States. I think there were a couple from China, from India. They were talking like this thing had already happened, but it hadn't happened yet. What concerns me even more is that the solution that was presented at the end of Event 201 that I showed you, the creation of a centralized global financial body that would manage the international response to the outbreak. Now, isn't it amazing how every major catastrophe caused by globalism seems to lead to more globalism? I mean, one might start to wonder if some of these events were triggered by incompetence or if they were deliberately engineered. Well, I don't wonder about this. At the very least, crisis events have been allowed to fester unchecked by organizations like the World Health Organization as they continue to write off the coronavirus as a non-issue that is well under control by a Chinese government that caused it to spread in the first place. So here's what's going to happen next. Listen closely. And for some reason, I'm only seeing 4 people in the chat room. Is that right? We had like 120 in there Sunday night. We have 4. You are self-quarantined, right? You're sitting at home and you've already seen everything on Netflix. You should be tuned into this right now, because this is what's going to happen next. Best case scenario is that the Western world is mostly unscathed by the virus itself, but the economic supply chain suffers major setbacks. The global economy, which was already crashing over the past year due to historic levels of corporate and consumer debt, and also, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, about companies buying back their own stock. Oh, no. It was huge. It's sort of like paying off your home mortgage by using your credit card. Yeah, you're paying the home mortgage off, all right, but you're putting it on a higher interest card that comes due sooner. So this is the problem with a company buying back its own stock. Typically what happens is the executives that had stock options or had the ability to be provided stock as bonuses to either hire on or take a promotion or reach a production milestone or a pricing milestone. They reached that milestone, and then those executives were able to sell that stock into the market, and the company bought the stock back. So instead of selling it on the public market, the company simply bought the stock back. What does this do? Well, it keeps the short traders off your trail, that's for sure, because the stock's not out there on the public market. But the company isn't actually bringing in revenue, which is normally what you would do if you were selling stock. Since you're buying the stock back, you're just draining the liquidity of the company. You're using the profits of the company to buy back stock. Now, the massive everything bubble, fueled by a decade of inflationary central bank stimulus, implodes. The government responds with totalitarian measures in the name of protecting the public. And I don't think really all that's happening yet, and that's because we have President Trump instead of President Sanders. But if we had President Sanders, that's exactly what would be happening. Globalist financial institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, they would step in and they would suggest that frail national monetary systems come under the management of their special drawing rights bond in order to mitigate the debt crisis. Essentially, this is a first and major step toward global governance. Worst case scenario, that was the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, the virus spreads through the U.S. and Europe, and governments respond the same way China's government has. Martial law, full-blown concentration camp culture. This would lead to, in the United States, civil war. Because unlike China, we have the armed American. And it would be a big deal. We would not be put into camps. We would not be put into quarantine camps. Europe, I'm afraid you're going to be screwed in the worst case scenario because, sorry, you're not armed. The establishment then suggests that paper money be removed from the system because it's a viral spreader. Yeah, the money itself has got the germ on it, and we got to collect it all. So all you people that have cash, not to worry, everything's under control. Please take your money back to the bank. Put it in a Ziploc bag, follow our instructions, or you're not going to be allowed in the bank. Take your cash into the bank and say, here you go, teller. This is all the cash I had at my house, and they'll count it and put it into your bank account. Thank you very much. Is there anything else we can do for you? Here's your receipt. Your money's in the bank. Well, there's a problem. Because about 20% of the people that live inside the United States, they're not doing business with the bank. Yeah, about 60 to 70% of that 20%, they're not documented. They're foreign citizens living here. They're foreign citizens from other countries, citizens of other countries that are living here, and they're not documented. Oh, they're working. Yeah, they're building houses, they're digging ditches, they're painting, they're mowing grass, they're doing nails, whatever, for cash. And they live on cash. They have cash at their house. They have a cash box. They pay their rent. They buy their gas, their groceries, everything with cash. We call them the bankless millions. The issue is that if this gets passed, all the cash has got the virus on it, and businesses, well, I'm sorry, you're going to have to post this little government sign that says, we no longer accept cash because, we don't want anybody to get sick. We want to collect, the virus. We want to quarantine it. And that means quarantine all the money. All the cash has to be quarantined. Well, the issue is that that's the way these people do business. And now they are cut off from doing commerce. Cash don't spend. Cash is the currency of Corona. It's a big deal. Now, this is a totally different kind of revolution because you got people here who aren't supposed to be here. They're not supposed to be loud. They're not supposed to be armed. They're not supposed to be here in the first place. But they are, and they have cash. And this is how they get flushed out. So what I recommend, because a lot of us do hold cash at home, because we don't know when the bank is going to take a holiday and decide that, you know what, by the way, that little card you have right there, why don't you bring it down on Friday? You know, today's Wednesday. We're going to give you some extra time, some extra Corona time, and you don't have to have the money right away. And don't worry about it. It's in the bank. Everything's under control. You're FDIC, insured, and just come back on Friday. Then you can buy. You can use your card. Go ahead and get what you need from the grocery, and you can scan that card. But nothing's going to come out of your account till Friday. Okay, so could treat it like a credit card for a couple of days. It'll be okay. But the people with cash, they can't do that. They can't eat. They can't drive. They can't travel. They can't do anything. Most of us have a little bit of cash at the house. And maybe or maybe not, we would say, oh, you know what? The government has said I better take this cash to the bank or I'm going to lose it. No, you won't. No, you won't. The cash will eventually be good again. But I recommend, since it won't spend, 25% of that cash should be in the form of silver. You should go to eBay and you should buy silver, or go down to the pawn shop and buy silver. It's going to cost you, 17, 18, 19 bucks an ounce, but silver will spend. Silver doesn't have any virus. You can go buy stuff with silver. People will accept it. They will accept it. They will do commerce in silver, especially silver dollars. But the silver ingots and bars, they'll spend just the same as money. I've done it a bunch of times. You might have to shop around a little bit, but you'll find a place to take it. I promise. That's how you protect yourself. Now, everything is going to go digital, and thus even local economies become completely centralized because of this digital nature. Now, this might be an engineered event, but I think the globalists are exploiting this natural outbreak. I mean, it could be anything. It could be strep throat. It could be, a bad case of diarrhea, like bad Taco Bell. It doesn't matter. What matters is what do they do with it? Well, they propagandize it. And I've had people actually tell me, because I'm still going to my events, even though the events have been postponed. I'm still flying because the airlines, they're not giving me any refund. I've already spent the money. I bought the tickets. Baby, I'm flying. So I'm going to go to the resort hotel, and there's not going to be an event there, but I'll sit in the lobby with my books. And if people want to buy books, I will sell them a book, and I will sign the book, and I will shake their hand, and we'll talk for a few minutes, and they'll go their merry way. I never back down on my word. I will not comply. I don't care who's watching. I will go, and I will be on time at the events where I'm supposed to be, even though the events were postponed. Because I'm not flushing thousands of dollars down the toilet in airplane tickets, and that's just the way it is. So, since I'm doing that, I am putting people at risk. I am exposing people to the virus. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Even if I was, you get the virus and you would get over it and you wouldn't even know you had it because it ain't that bad. You should immediately be suspicious. if Chuck Schumer's answer to our problems is a centralized bank, a centralized insurance company, a centralized school system. How many people will realize that centralization is the cause of all of these problems? And how many people will fight to prevent ultimate centralization of under this psychopathic globalist cult? The real viral outbreak is a significant danger to us all, but this ain't it. An even greater threat is the supposed cure. Trading our economic and social freedom in the name of stopping the coronavirus? Really? No matter how deadly the bug, it just ain't worth it. It ain't worth it. You know, it's increasingly likely that Americans are going to get a couple checks, a couple $1,000 in the coming weeks. I'm pretty sure, it should be, if you use the hashtag not my president anytime in the last 6 months, I think you should be on the list, hashtag not my check. You don't support the government, you shouldn't get a check from the government. And somebody in the chat room is saying people are dying, Brooks. People are dying every day. People die every day like Greenleaf, every single day. And they die of some pretty bad stuff. And if they're dying of this virus, I would be very surprised. They're not dying of the virus. That's just not true. They're dying of pneumonia. They're dying of heart failure. They're dying of kidney failure, but they're not dying from this virus. This virus is no worse than the common cold. In fact, it is the common cold. Coronavirus is the common cold. The common cold is coronavirus. I had it 2 years ago. I got over it. I'm cured. I'm immune. People are dying from pneumonia that they develop by not being able to get the phlegm out of their lungs, and the pneumococci is growing down in the bottom of their lungs, and the toxin emitted by the bacteria pneumococci is what is killing them. That's what they die of. The virus is not deadly. It's not like Ebola. It's just not. So you can't throw that on me. It's part of this $1 trillion stimulus bill that they're going to. Remember, President Trump was saying everybody's going to get a tax cut and it's going to be targeted to the middle class and all that. They had the money set aside anyway. The Trump administration announced it's seeking yesterday to arrest the economic damage on the street level, on our level, from how we're reacting to the coronavirus. This is the economic damage. And this is going to be a big infusion. Yes, and David brings up a good point. Colloidal silver is a good preventative measure. A small amount of colloidal silver in your system will knock that virus right out. And the virus, your body will not have the histamine reaction to it that some people have. Another is vitamin C, elderberry. These kinds of things have natural compounds in them that mess with the macrophage. The macrophage is the little molecular spaceship that the RNA travels in. All of these things work good. So a centerpiece of this plan is sending government checks to you, right to me, right to my home address, right here. And this is a $500 billion component, though it wouldn't benefit those above a certain income level. Don't worry, I'm not at that income level. I mean, if we're talking about reparations here, if we ever talk about reparations on this program, I always ask some simple questions just to try to clarify. Like, for instance, would Halle Berry get a check? How about Oprah? Beyonce? No, don't think so. Because these women are rich. They're rich. They don't need reparations. The check is to go out to people who earn wages. Because people are going to miss a couple paychecks. Their employer is going to shut down for a couple weeks. These restaurants, my friend with Midwood Smokehouse, very, very successful restaurant, the best brisket in the entire, maybe the world. I've eaten brisket all over the world. Nothing like this. It's like unbelievable. Midwood Smokehouse has 137 employees he just furloughed. That's not good, but you can't have a restaurant open and nobody comes in because you can't have social gatherings of over 10 people. Who are you going to serve? Nobody, because nobody's going to be in there. Well, what do you do with 137 employees? You keep making their paychecks every single Friday? No, he furloughed them in order to keep from being driven out of business. Those 137 people, they're going to get checks. Not from my friend, but from the taxpayers. Maybe in a couple of weeks, it'll pick back up. People have money in their pockets. They'll come back in. By the way, Kid Rock, he ain't closing his bar. So if you want to go to Nashville, Kid Rock's bar is open and the kitchen. The idea isn't unprecedented, actually. It's been done before 2 times. In 2008, Americans received a check for between $300 and $600 from the federal government. Plus, they received $300 for each child under the age 17, just before the financial crisis as part of a massive stimulus bill. In 2001, after 9/11, government cut a check for $300 to most Americans. Both were provided as rebates, or put another way, through tax cuts. This time, the government would fund the checks through further borrowing. That's the interesting part. The coronavirus has upended modern American life in just a few weeks. I didn't think it could be done. I actually thought the Trump economy was so strong, the Roaring '20s was going so good, nothing short of what I wrote in my book, Charm of Favor. Charm of Favor was a #1 bestseller. It's not now, but it was when it came out in 2018. In there was a bomb plot. It was a nuclear bomb plot. Why? Because I knew the Global Syndicate was going to lose, and they don't like losing. And I kind of felt like they were going to be backed into a corner, and the only way that they could fight their way out of the corner was a terror attack that potentially killed millions of Americans so they could blame it on President Trump. That was the plot. Of course, the book is way better than I just described it to you, and it should be a major motion picture. If you're a producer out there, please call me. But that was the idea. And lo and behold, that is exactly what has happened. By the way, the bomb came from Asia. So now we have a different bomb. Only this bomb, it ain't even real. It isn't even real. It's just a cold. And they've turned it into something like the bubonic plague, like some a zombie apocalypse. I would really be freaked out if some of the people that died of this complications from this illness suddenly sprang back to life and went running down the street biting other people. That would be pretty wild. That would be a zombie apocalypse. So restaurants, bars, movie theaters, concerts, political rallies, everything upended. And this has triggered an initial wave of layoffs, furloughs, companies, consumers. We're cutting back in everything. Well, you are. I'm not. Okay, I did go buy 2 quarts of Haagen-Dazs chocolate chip chocolate ice cream instead of 1. Because I didn't want to run out. I figured, people might hoard this. So I'm going to buy 2 instead of 1. Because normally I would just buy 1, and then the next week, when I went to the grocery again, I may pick another flavor, but there's always chocolate chip chocolate there. I just pick up another quart. I don't hoard anything because my grocer has it all the time. And they had it, so I bought it. So sue me, okay? I bought 2 tubs of ice cream instead of 1. But that's the only thing. So a survey yesterday from NPR, PBS, and Marist found that 18% of American workers either lost their jobs or had their hours cut from their work schedules. And that's pretty much true, especially on the coastal cities. Of course, I haven't had my hours cut because of what I do. But it's fueled calls for the government to step in with this direct emergency aid, and that's exactly what they're going to do. Jason Furman, even the former head of the Obama administration's Council on Economic Advisors, he backs the idea. Good idea, President Trump. That's exactly what we need to do. The proposal gained more steam when the announcement was made. People immediately responded to it. To staunch the fallout, President Trump weighed in even larger checks to encourage spending and help people make ends meet. During the last recession over a decade ago, government checks went out to most people as long as they had filed a tax return. Recipients of Social Security were also eligible for the payout. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said the administration is aiming to send the first round of checks by the end of April. That's pretty soon. That's I would say reacting pretty quickly. Millionaires and other wealthy Americans, they're not going to get a check. And it's likely they wouldn't this time either. They're not going to get a check. And no sooner was this considered, no sooner were these plans made, but Health and Human Services reported a very heavy attempt to hack them. Yeah, Sunday night, HHS, there was a huge attempt to hack them. The incident, described by 3 unnamed sources, and it was actually reported by Bloomberg, did not majorly impact the department systems. They didn't get anything. They didn't get any IDs. They did manage to spread some misinformation, though. This is how it was detected. The White House National Security Council appeared to react to one of those pieces of false information in a Sunday tweet, noting text message rumors of a national quarantine were fake, not going to happen. The NSC tweet was related to the intrusion. There was no national lockdown. The hacking incident included multiple intrusion efforts. They tried multiple times. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and other Trump administration officials were reportedly aware of the incidents. The HHS, NSC, and White House all declined to respond to Bloomberg's requests for comment. And we're not talking about former presidential candidate Michael Bloomberg. We're talking about his organization. It is a multi-billion-dollar news service and pretty well respected, pretty expensive to get a feed. One unnamed source for Bloomberg said they do not believe the hackers were able to steal any data. HHS officials reportedly believe the attack was carried out by a hostile foreign government, though no confirmation of the source of the attack exists at this time. And there were more things. Of course, Louis Gohmert's been right on top of a lot of things. He's holding up this House-passed corona relief bill because he discovered that Nancy Pelosi tried to stick in their permanent funding for Planned Parenthood. That did not go well. And because the bill got held up, President Trump went around this and declared a state of emergency. And I'm going to talk about that in the next hour because a lot of people don't know what kind of power this gives the president. It gives him a lot of power. Gohmert's among 40 Republicans who voted against the bill. It did overwhelmingly pass the House on Saturday, and it was endorsed by President Donald Trump. In a statement explaining his vote, the Texas Republican praised how Trump had negotiated the package, but said the crucial bill was not even given the normal amount of time to be debated. We voted, and I truly had wanted to vote yes, but could not for a bill that created so many concerns without time to examine whether some of our language did more harm than good. Unfortunately, now it has passed the House. We find out what this bill actually does. Hopefully the Senate will take the time to clean up the damage our bill caused and not just rubber stamp it so I can vote for the bill that they send back to the House. What normally happens is it goes to the Senate, it goes into amendment process, and if they make amendments, they send it back to the House to go into committee. And of course, Louis Gohmert would be on that committee. And it's at that time then a lot of the repairs can be made if the Senate puts amendments on it and sends it back to the House. And that's the way the process works. It works okay for smaller bills. For these large omnibus bills that are like 6,500 pages, it don't work worth a crap. Because usually those big bills, these think tanks have invested so much money and so much time into writing them, and what they do cleverly is they put in there what the president wants, and they hold it hostage. So if he wants to increase military spending, they go, aha, he wants to increase military spending. So let's put this and this and this and this in there. And of course, the president says, no, I don't want all that stuff, but I want my military spending. And they say, well, the only way you're going to get it is to, bend over and take one for the team. And that's why we always propose in the Convention of States, one of the amendments that we propose to the Constitution concerns line item veto. It gives the president the ability to take one line item out of a bill and scratch it. Just take the black highlighter and mark right through it. The bill goes through, but the Democrats don't get all their pork. They say, well, but the president can't write law. He's not writing law. If you would send laws to him, one law per bill or one bill per law, then he could either veto or pass each individual piece. But you don't. You send 6,500 pages with hundreds and hundreds of laws, some of them that don't go into effect for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years. And the president can't veto any of that stuff. So what he says is, well, I'm not even going to be president in 5 years. So if this doesn't go into effect for 6 years, I get what I want, they get what they want, but I'll be long gone by the time that happens. And that's exactly how screwed up our government gets. Just that way. Exactly that way. And I don't think President Trump, he's done it already with these omnibus bills, but it's because the military was so decimated and he was so furious. And he said, I will never sign another one of these things. But he did. He signed one more, and that's why he's put so much money into the military. I think what's going to happen, though, in this election, especially if more states decide they're not going to have conventions, like Ohio didn't have their caucuses or their primaries because of the coronavirus threat. What will happen is those delegates, they don't get awarded yet. They might postpone it till September or October, but by then the convention's over, which means neither Sanders or Biden are going to be able to get a majority of the delegates because those delegates are going to be off the table. What they planned on being a globalist takeover of the American government backfired on them, because what it did is it prevented the Democrats from getting enough delegates in order to have a nominee. They got candidates, but they don't have a nominee. And that means it goes to the convention. And a brokered convention will be an all-out brawl. Why? Because the first vote's going to fail. They're not going to be able to get to 50%. Neither candidate, none of the candidates, Gabbard or Sanders or Biden, they're not going to be able to get to 50%, which means the first vote fails. Then it goes back to the floor of the convention for a second vote. And that second vote, guess what happens? All those candidates that backed out, that ended their campaigns, they show up. And we got candidates that aren't even on the ballot, that never even ran, that didn't even get a vote ever. They show up, Hillary Clinton, and they walk onto the floor and they say, "Here I am to save the day." And lo and behold, Hillary Clinton wins 52% of the vote in the second round, and Hillary becomes the nominee by popular demand. So you could see, and this could happen. This could happen. You don't have to worry about Sanders or Biden picking Hillary as a vice presidential running mate, because they're never going to get the chance. Once this goes to a broker convention, this is exactly what's going to happen. We'll take a quick break. Revolution Radio needs to run some commercials. We'll take a quick break and go quiet for a little bit while those breaks happen. And then we will be back at 1 minute after the top of the hour. So don't go away. YouTubers, go call up your friends and tell them to show up for this second hour. Let's double this audience. We'll be right back after these messages. Okay, I believe that we are back. Mr. Producer, are we clear of the commercials on Revolution Radio? I think we are. All right, let's continue. This is our second hour of X Squared Radio. We're coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains through the America Free Radio studios on Revolution Radio. Nope, still not through. A little synced. All right, we're on the freedomslips.com on the Revolution Radio Network, and this is the America Free Radio Studios bringing you X Squared Radio, and I'm your host, Brooks Agnew. We are live on audio on Revolution Radio, and we are live on YouTube, so that if you want to, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is Brooks Agnew, easy enough. And don't forget to please visit my website. It's, brooksagnew.com. It is the cure for the coronavirus. It is also the cure for sheltering in place, because there's stuff there that you can do. Oh, you can read poetry. You can read about my philosophy, where I'm going to be appearing this summer and fall, and you can come and see me live. But there's also a great store there, and you can buy each one of my books, or if you prefer, you can buy the audiobooks if you don't like having a Kindle or an Amazon version of the book around. But if you do buy the Amazon paperback or the Kindle version, I will give you the audiobook for free. The instructions for how to get that are right inside the book. All you have to do is write me, and I will send you the link. So if you're not a great reader, don't worry about it. I read it for you. Hey, Michael, how you doing? Oh, it's Mitchell. Oh, is it? Yeah, Mitchell. I see you out there. Yes, howdy to you too. And Festus is hanging out there too. Lots of people in the chat room. Piper and lots of conversation going back and forth. Normally we have a little higher audience than what we see in the YouTube chat room tonight. I'm not really sure why it is low right now. It's just a Wednesday night. We had about double this amount last Wednesday. But in case you missed a program, all you have to do is go to revolutionradio.com and you can listen to the archives. They're always available. Or if you If you want to, if you can't find the archive there, you can definitely find it on YouTube. So I was discussing with you in the last hour these presidential emergency powers. They are vast, pretty incredible. I was a little bit surprised that they were declared, but so soon, since we really haven't seen anything. I mean, we have a lot of reaction, we have a lot of smoke, but we don't have a lot of fire, not even from crematoriums. The Constitution doesn't really expressly grant the president additional powers in times of national emergency. However, it has been tested. Yes. Oh, the storm is happening. Yes, I agree with that, Kathleen. It definitely is. She's from North Carolina as well. I'm living in North Carolina, but I'm working during the day in South Carolina. And the project that we're working on is going pretty well, at least from the suppliers that I am coordinating. And we're really happy with everything that's going on. And we haven't been curtailed in the least. Everybody's healthy. Everybody's happy. We have some additional, preventative measures in place, but so does everybody. And, we'll be diligent for, a few maybe one ice cream season, and then it'll go back to normal. But many scholars think that the framers of the Constitution implied these powers, these extra powers, because the structural design of the executive branch enables it to act much, much faster, like this fast. That's why it's a single person. I mean, a president and the vice president, they make up the executive branch. They're supposed to be reacting fast. And the main reason the framers of the Constitution made it this way is to thwart enemies. We didn't want an enemy to take advantage of a parliamentary system where you have, labor parties and nobles and commoners, and, no decision can be made because you got to have a majority and nobody has it, and everybody's arguing and calling names, and, an enemy could just waltz right in, and, the Army or the Navy or the Air Force never responds because there's no executive. All you have is a prime minister. And, all he can really do is try to get the votes. Not the way it works in the United States of America, because the Constitution remains silent on the issue. The courts really cannot grant the executive branch these powers when it tries to wield them. The courts will only recognize a right of the executive branch to use emergency powers if Congress has granted such powers to the president. And that's exactly what happened. Emergency presidential power is not a new idea. The way in which it is used in the 21st century, well, it's going to present new challenges because the Global Syndicate doesn't want it. The Global Syndicate wants to destroy America because what is standing in between the Global Syndicate and what it wants to accomplish, which is they want their planet back. They want the rulership back that they had in 1777 and 1786. But by 1787, once the convention was over, we had a new constitution in place. We had a new form of government in place. And before long, we had 20 states that were working together to accomplish something in a united way, using the central government as a managing body. And that's not what the Global Syndicate wanted. And we went to war a lot of times to try to defeat us, and it didn't work, mostly because the executive could react so quickly. A claim of emergency powers was at the center of President Abraham Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus without congressional approval in 1861. Lincoln claimed that the rebellion created an emergency that permitted him the extraordinary power of unilaterally suspending the writ of habeas corpus. With Chief Justice Roger Taney sitting as judge, the Federal District Court of Maryland struck down the suspension of ex parte Merryman, although Lincoln ignored the order. President Roosevelt similarly invoked emergency powers when he issued an order directing that all Japanese Americans residing on the West Coast be placed into internment camps during World War II. The Supreme Court upheld his order. Harry S. Truman declared the use of emergency powers when he nationalized private steel mills that failed to produce steel because of a labor strike in 1952. He broke the Union. With the Korean War ongoing, Truman asserted that he could not wage war successfully if the economy failed to provide him with the material resources necessary to keep the troops well equipped. The Supreme Court refused to accept the argument, voting 6-3, that neither the commander-in-chief nor powers nor any claimed emergency powers gave the president the authority to unilaterally seize private property without congressional legislation. One thing Harry Truman liked, he liked his corporate government. He liked it a lot. He was a fascist through and through, and he liked the power. The Global Syndicate did not want the middle class to play in their sandbox. So in 1929, they crashed the entire world. They forced the American people into soup lines, and they placed their fascist New York governor in power for more than 13 years to build the agency government inside our government. And that government has ruled for 87 years until Donald Trump was elected. He began taking their empire apart and putting America first. It was a full-on war that the Global Syndicate was losing. They needed a weapon to tear a gash in the underbelly of the Trump economy. They created and released a virus, and then they marketed it to shut down the world. Why? Because they don't have a candidate. They could not beat him at the polls. So they would destroy the one thing that made him strong, the economy. They did not count on him going along with it. They did not count on the Emergency Powers Act. And that is exactly what happened. So we ask, what can he do? Here's what I came up with. This is from my research since his declaration of emergency powers. And there are 136 statutes that kick into place. Most of them have to do with things that he can do with the military, things he can do with the Coast Guard, things he can do with assets. But these are the main things that you need to pay attention to. Injuring, interfering with, or obstructing the preparations for or carrying out of war, or, now listen closely, defense activities of the United States or associated countries, with the intent to do or reason to believe the actions will do, is punishable with fine or imprisonment up to 30 years. So if you stand in the way of the presidential wall that's going up, that can be seen as obstructing the preparation for defense activities of the United States. And you could be summarily picked up and put into prison under these emergency powers. The president may waive a 30-day minimum comment period proposed rules and regulations issued under the Energy and Policy Conservation Act. If you want to comment on things, first they have to be posted in the Federal Register. If you've never been to the Federal Register, you're probably not going to know what I'm talking about. But the Federal Register is a place every single day, every single agency has to post what they want to buy, what they want to do, what laws they're proposing, what rule changes they want to make. And then the public, if you read the Federal Register, you could respond to that. You could say, hell no, we don't want that, or this is a good idea, or this is a change that needs to be made to it. And if enough people make a comment on it, then the president has to respond. But he can waive that 30-day minimum comment period, and he could just go to work. He can make acquisitions. Now, here's another one. Public vessels may dispose of potentially infectious medical waste in ocean waters more than 50 nautical miles from the nearest land by taking precautions to prevent the waste from coming ashore after disposal. In other words, you can put a cinder block on it and you can sink it if it's potentially infectious medical waste. Kind of interesting to think of, isn't it? What would happen? Seriously. Here's another one. The president may use the Public Health Service. Remember I told you that HHS, they attempted to hack it. They attempted to break into it several different ways. Several different tries were made from a foreign government. They wouldn't tell me which one. I suspect maybe it was China. But they tried to break into it in order to gain access to information. They wanted to know maybe how bad the virus is, but one of the things they did detect were attempts to put information into the system. In other words, this is way worse than you can imagine, to really, really create problems, but they were unable to get in there. So just to let you know, this was the plan. The president may use the Public Health Service to such extent and in such manner as shall, in their judgment, promote the public interest. Or the president may, by executive order, declare the commissioned core of the Public Health Service to be a military service. It's important to know this because military service can take enforcement actions. Yeah, like, I know you're thinking martial law, but I mean enforcement actions, like, stopping people from gathering in large groups, or, breaking up a riot or something like that. You're talking about the organization that manages, I hate to tell you this, but public housing. Yeah, Health and Human Services also runs public housing and low-income housing. So there are a lot of things that could go into this. The point is the president has emergency powers that are granted him by this act. Here's another one. The Secretary of Health and Human Services may authorize the use of an unapproved drug, a device, or a biological product, or an unapproved use of an approved drug, device, or biological product. So I don't even need to tell you what could be done there. You could have a vaccine that, hey, we gave it to 6 people and they didn't die, must be okay. The president could say, you know what? I like it. Let's get it out by Friday. Let's get it out by April. Normally, it would take a year and all of that. What does that say? What did you say? Festus said something in the chat room here. He said, yes, Brooks, Lincoln went after half of the legislative branch in Maryland on that name lot and imprisoned have until the end of the Civil War. Yeah, he wanted to prevent them from voting against the war. You're right. He did. I don't think he was a good leader either. I think he made a lot of mistakes. And I write about it in Charm of Favor. You can read. It's sort of the past and the present and everything put together. What I didn't know is somehow I was tapping into the same, let's just call it the remote viewing stream that certain individuals known as Q or QAnon were using. And I published the book in Christmas of 2018, which is a little early on in the Q world. But the things that I published in the book turned out to actually come true. In fact, I actually wrote the book as a screenplay in 2011. Yeah, before, even Trump was a candidate. In fact, when Trump started to come down the escalator, it alerted me that something in that screenplay was triggered in me. And so I took the screenplay out and I read it again and I went, holy crap, things in the screenplay are starting to take place. So it started as the Birth trilogy, Birth volume 1, 2, and 3. And then people wanted me to write a sequel, which I really couldn't do because the books were they were too good. So I wrote a prequel, which is Charm of Favor. And that's where all this stuff came out. Here's another one. He may determine that the money supply has been corrupted or contaminated and suspend its use in public commerce. He may order banks to collect all the cash and the public to do commerce by electronic means. I talked about this in the last hour. Works fine for me because, a significant amount of the cash I have at home is in silver bars, and I have them in 10 ounce, 5 ounce, and 1 ounce, so I can, sort of make change. But I can buy things with silver, and I can take the rest of the cash back to the bank. But 20% of earners in our country do not have bank accounts. They're called the bankless millions, and a significant number of them, it's way over 50% of those 60 million people, they're foreign citizens. They're not supposed to be here. They're damn sure not supposed to be working here, but they are. And they're earning money. And, they rebuild engines, they mow grass, they paint houses, they, can work in the fields or chicken plants or whatever. They get found out every now and then. But the point is, they work for cash. And when they get their cash, or they get a check and then there's some check cashing service that gives them cash, they don't have bank accounts. And what happens is these people, if they're asked by the government to turn in their money, they're not going to be able to because they don't have an account to put it into. So they're going to be hard pressed to do something. Yes, I heard that. Maybe they will self-deport. It's possible. But I could tell you probably what will happen is black market banks. Yeah. They exist. Just ask Joe Biden. You could take taxpayer money and you can run it through nonprofits and you can run it through shell corporations in a foreign country. And they'll take that taxpayer money all day long. And, of course, they'll launder some of it back out in the form of another form of cash or some clean money. And it'll go back out in the system and right back into the hands of the politician or the diplomat like Maria Yovanovitch or somebody else. And boom, they're millionaires. And who's going to know? Who's going to know? Nobody's going to know. Everybody's in on it. So that's what I'm talking about. And you get black market cash. For instance, I'm not saying I would do this, but let me just give you an example. I have a bank account. I can put your cash in my bank account. And then, you could use this gift card. Yeah, you could use this gift card I bought for you at Walmart. Well, I know you gave me $250, and this is just a $200 gift card. But Javier, there are handling charges here. I gotta risk, running that cash through my account, and I know you gave me $250 in cash, but this $200 gift card will work, and now you can go. And you can go shop electronically and buy what you need to buy. It's called black market cash. It's called money laundering. It will spring up everywhere. It will spring up overnight. Why? Because those 20s, they're not going to spend anymore. Because because the money's been infected with something. And by the way, I'll just tell you one more time this hour, if you have any infected money at all, you can ship it to me, okay? Just put it in a baggie, put it in a box, and ship it directly to me. I don't care how much it is. Millions. Send it all to me. All the infected cash you can find. Well, I mean, I'll deduct a fee and I'll clean it, and then I'll send you the sanitized cash, after things settle down a little bit. And I'm not the only service. I'm willing to do this as a public service to you. I'm just saying. These emergency powers, very powerful. Now, he may require all citizens, and this is the one I think is most important. You should pay big attention to this, especially if you live in North Carolina. In North Carolina in 2018, we went to the polls and we had a referendum on our ballot. And guess what that referendum was for? You remember? That's correct. It was an amendment to the North Carolina Constitution requiring a photo ID to vote. We're not talking a law here. We're talking an amendment made to the state constitution. Yeah, I know. We had a 3 Obama judges that set that aside and appealed it, and I don't know how they could do that because it's an amendment to the Constitution, but they did it. And it looks like in 2020 you're going to be able to vote again in North Carolina if you could just fog a mirror. Sorry to say, we tried, we did the best we could. But listen closely, because now we're talking about presidential emergency powers. It may require all citizens over the age of 18 who are registered to vote to produce proper identification prior to casting a vote in a federal election. He may suspend absentee ballots from being harvested. By the way, that's legal in some states, not legal in most states. It's a felony in most states. In California, it's legal. Suspend absentee ballots from being harvested and require them to be mailed through the U.S. mail or by military courier in order to be valid. You see, this is a big deal, because if you mail a ballot and you're from Ballots R Us, well, they will bury you under the prison in Gitmo, because that's mail fraud. Oh, yeah, you could make out a false ballot. That's no problem. You can make those out by the truckload. You can make those out by the truckload, and you can just back up to the counting station even the next day after the polls close. Just back up and just dump those ballots right into the system, and the DNC will count them for you. As long as they're Democrat votes, of course. You understand. All those votes have to be for Democrats. They never, ever, ever count on the Republican side, ever. But if you mail one of those phony ballots, you go into prison, because now you've entered the U.S. mail system. This is a big deal. You cross over into the U.S. Post Office, mail fraud will put you under the jail. So this is a big deal. And requiring photo ID for all registered voters over the age of 18. And I would say probably they're going to add the caveat, you have to be alive at the time. You can't actually be dead and vote. Even though you're a registered voter from the last time, if you died, you can't vote. You can't do that. So, and this will stop most of the wholesale voter fraud. Oh, it'll be a big deal. This is war right there, that one right there. But it's in there. Here's another one. He may close all the borders of the country with Canada and Mexico and suspend travel into the country by non-citizens. I think that's already taken place. It may authorize the immediate duty and tax-free repatriatization of capital and assets into the United States. Very powerful. Because right now there's about $4.5 trillion of money that's been earned by Americans. I know typically it should have been discovered by FATCA. FATCA is the Foreign Account Tax Code Act or Tax Collection Act. It works like this. It authorizes the IRS to write a bank in Ireland and to say, hey, we need a list of all the Americans that have an account at your bank, and we need the balance in that account and how long that balance has been there. And Ireland has pretty much told the IRS, you can stick that where the sun don't shine because we're not giving it to you. And the French, the same thing. And by the way, this paperwork has to be returned in triplicate in English. And the French have said, no. You see, that's against our state constitution. We're not doing it. Switzerland said, English? Sorry, we don't generate anything in English. It's not happening. So a lot of countries have balked on it, but some have responded, and some of that money has been taxed. But most of it is not. It's earned by Americans that are making money in foreign countries because they have companies or they have ownership or they, bought and sold something, a yacht, an airplane, whatever. They made a lot of money and it's accumulated, but they don't want to bring it back into the United States because it gets hit with 65% tax, some incredible, crazy amount of money. And President Trump has been wanting to repatriatize this money since before the election, his 2016 election. And he said, basically, we'll see what happens. Because, why should I pass up, 10%? 10%, how about that? We'll give you 10%. It's a one-time deal. And he makes 10% tax on that. My guess is we need that money in our economy so badly because about $300 to $500 billion a year has been removed from our economy. By whom? Well, by the foreign citizens that are in our country. And what they do is they gather up their money and they say, hey, I only need $300 to get by this week and I made $400. So they take $100 and they ship it back home to El Salvador, Guatemala, or Honduras, or Venezuela, or Somalia. And when that happens, Earth Explorers, that is robbery. Because that money that they were paid was supposed to go down to the Whole Foods market. It was supposed to go down to the laundromat. It was supposed to be paid to the trailer park guy. That money was supposed to be used in the local economy. And then when it's used in the local economy, it rolls over and goes to the next guy, and it buys gas, and it buys beer, and it goes around. They estimate 14 times in the local economy before it's extracted back to the central bank. 14 times. It goes from cash drawer to cash drawer to cash drawer around that community. But when that foreign citizen puts it in an envelope at the Western Union or the post office or DHL, and he exports that money, it's gone. It's like sucking it right out the window on the freeway. It never goes around in the community. It hurts the local economy because that money is extracted. It's gone. It's of no value. And here's the bad thing. It actually hurts the economy where it arrives. When that money arrives in Guatemala, that $100 arrives in Honduras or El Salvador, it hurts that economy. Because that money, when it arrives at Mamacita's kitchen and she opens the envelope, she goes out and spends that money in the local economy. Well, guess what? She didn't earn that money. That money didn't come from any value inside that community. And so what it does, it inflates the money supply in that community significantly. And by significantly, we're talking 1,500 to 10,000% inflation. That doesn't help. That doesn't help. They think it does, but it doesn't. It doesn't help. It doesn't help. It hurts everyone, but they still do it. $300 to $500 billion a year. That's like a trade deficit that's unreal. We call it remittances. It has a nickname to it, and you can't stop it because it's cash. They find a way to get it out of the country, to get it back, to the folks, to the cousins, to the brothers, to the mom. I mean, that's just the way it's done. Or it's paid to the cartels for getting them the job and getting them, across the border in the first place illegally. That's what I'm saying. All this hurts the economy. And ultimately, what it hurts is the ability for small business, startup businesses to access that capital, which normally should be there, in order to start up another plant. I drive about 136 miles one way to work every day. Yeah, I know it's 272 miles round trip every day. Yeah, I get it, believe me. But for me, drive time is talk time, so I'm okay with it for now. But I drive by millions and millions of square feet of empty factories, big buildings, 200, 300, 400,000 square feet, totally empty. Banners over the windows, for lease, for lease, for lease. These buildings should be full of companies making stuff. They should be full of people working in those buildings making stuff. But they're not. It's not because the business isn't there. Not because the sales aren't there. Not because they're not smart people, hardworking, dedicated people ready to put that into action. It's because there's no money. There's no investment capital in the United States. It's all overseas. It's all offshore because the people that made the money can't get it back into the country. Except now, under the emergency powers the president has been granted, he may immediately, duty and tax-free, repatriatize this capital and bring it back into this country. It would immediately provide a liquid base from which this venture investment could be made. And even though we're at the lowest level, lowest percentage of startup businesses in this country since its founding, actually before its founding, 1675, I can go back that far, the lowest percentage of startup businesses in this country ever, because of this complete wasteland of investment capital in this country. And that's because the money's sitting out there. It can't dance. It can't come here and do stuff that needs to be done because it has been exported from the country. And now it can be brought back in because of these emergency powers. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And you can tell your friends about that, and you can call your congressman about that. And if you have President Trump's email, you can send him that and tell him I told him about it. So we've gotten to the point now where the economy has sunk, okay? It isn't sinking, it's sunk. I've been buying stock on my stock app on my phone for 2 weeks. I've been buying at 75 and 80% discounts. I have the cash. I know what stocks I want to buy. They good performing stocks. They're going to survive this. But man, I can buy that stock for about 75% back a book right now, and I'm doing it. And there are other people out there doing it too. But the Trump administration is putting together a rumored $1 trillion plus stimulus package. It looks like it's making some headway. And I asked the question, should you bail the boat or should you let it sink? You know, we've been through these bailouts before. It didn't work out so good. They didn't work out so well. We bailed out General Motors. We bailed out the banks after they made all those bad home loans that turned out to be nothing but dog crap in a brown paper bag. Mortgage-backed securities, my ass. And now I hear that the Federal Reserve is buying back mortgage-backed securities. Most people's eyes glaze over when they think about that. Mortgage-backed securities. Oh, that must be good. That must be good. No, that's not good. The Fed, they buy bonds. The Fed, they'll buy a debt, but they don't buy mortgage-backed securities. That's not what's supposed to happen. Investors buy mortgage-backed securities. In the old days, it was companies like Kislak and Quasar. Now it's big companies that they buy $50 million blocks of first mortgages. But those first mortgages are underwritten by FHA or Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae, and they trust them because they've gone through these people credit. They know they're working. They know they make their utility bills on time, all of that stuff. Each one of these home loans has been vetted 10 ways from Sunday. So it's supposed to be strong. But the Fed, they're not American. They're not federal. They're not supposed to be buying this stuff. You don't make your payments to the Fed. You make your payments to Wells Fargo, or you make your payments to Citigroup or Santander. That's a big company out there buying mortgage-backed securities. And they make money at it, and they're good at it. Or Ally Bank. They make money at it, and they're good at it. So this is going to be taxpayer funded, okay? It's going to be a taxpayer funded bailout of largely corporate America, according to leaks cited by the media. Now, Trump, in the press conference today, he singled out a $50 billion in bailout funds for U.S. airlines alone. And maybe they need it. I don't know. They're not giving me a refund on my plane tickets, I'll tell you that. I got to fly. A bailout of this type is designed to bail out shareholders and unsecured creditors. And that's all it is. The alternative would be a U.S. Chapter 11 bankruptcy procedure, which would allow the company to operate while it is being handed to the creditors, with the shareholders getting wiped out. It happens. So get this. The big four U.S. airlines. We're talking about Delta, United, American, and Southwest. Yeah, I bought tickets from 3 of these 4 just in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Their stock is now getting smashed because they may run out of cash in a few months. And these airlines are going to be the primary recipients of that $50 billion bailout. And remember, GM got $23.5 billion. It was supposed to be the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Fund. Oh, it sounded good. I liked it. I was in the electric truck business. I was like, yeah, baby. $23.5 billion. Give me a little bit of that grant money. I'll start my company. No, that's not what happened. That's not what happened at all. Yeah. I standing in the congressional auditorium talking to Nancy Pelosi's people and Larry Kissel's people and saying, hey, what about this $23.5 billion Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Fund? I'm an advanced technology and I'm in the vehicle manufacturing business. And I applied for $23 million. Oh, no. We could never do that. Why? Why not? That's what it's for. I mean, that's what I am. No, you see, all that money's been earmarked for General Motors when they come out of bankruptcy. Yeah. Oh, I swear that's exactly what they said. It's the truth. It's not a leak. That's a fact. So, the bottom line is that these companies wasted, they blew, they incinerated willfully and recklessly together about $43.7 billion in cash on, and this is well documented, a share buyback program since 2012 for the sole purpose of enriching the very shareholders that will now be bailed out by the taxpayer. I don't like it. Share buybacks were considered as a form of marketplace manipulation, to keep that share price up because, the company was buying it back. They were borrowing money at cheap rates and buying the shares back. Anyway, it was illegal under SEC rules until 1982, when the SEC Rule 10b-18, which provided corporations a safe harbor to buy back their own shares under certain conditions. Once corporations figured out that nobody cared, really, Bush, he wasn't going to say anything about it. Obama, yeah, right. Put a little grease in the palm, baby. You can do anything you want to do. And that no one was auditing anything. That wasn't going to happen because they were all laundering money. Share buybacks exploded. In fact, that's the reason why companies were sitting there at 100 to 200 times earnings. They have been hyped endlessly by Wall Street. And those $4.5 trillion in cash, it was wasted, it was blown, incinerated on share buybacks since 2012 for the sole purpose of enriching the shareholders. It's now missing from the corporate balance sheets, where these share buybacks were often funded with debt. They borrowed the money, cheap money, prime money, or just a couple of LIBOR up. And the record amount of corporate debt, record by any measure, any measure you want to think of, that has piled up since 2012 has become the Fed's number one concern as trigger of the next financial crisis. And guess what? Here we are. We're at the next financial crisis. Now, in 2018, even the SEC got briefly nervous about the ravenous share buybacks and what they did to corporate financial and operational health. We're entering the roaring 20s, people. Money is being made. Stocks are going up. The stock market went up trillions of dollars. Millions of people went back to work. On too many occasions, companies doing these buybacks, they've failed to make the long-term investments in innovation or their workforce that our economy so badly needs. Hardly anything is hurting as bad as the aviation business in this country as far as innovation. Look at Southwest. They've been flying the same airplane since they were founded in 1964. They're still flying the 737. Yes, they're newer models. The 400, the 600, the 800, nice airplane. The MAX 8, well, sorry, that got grounded, but you know what I'm saying. The SEC Commissioner Jackson pointed out, and he fretted whether the existing rules can protect investors, workers, and communities from the torrent of corporate trading dominating today's markets. Obviously, they can't. And now, see why. Enriching the shareholders is the number one goal, no matter what the risks. Hey, don't question me. Go look at their mission statements. Every single one of their mission statements. I work for the Fortune 500. I read them every day. There is not one of them that doesn't have the word shareholders. Customers are there, yeah. Shareholders in the mission statement. Enriching the shareholders is the number one goal. These shareholders are the very corporate executives and board members that make the buyback decisions. And when it hits the fan, and it's going to, there's always the taxpayer or the Fed to bail out those shareholders. And that's the way it's always been done. But this type of thinking is heinous. We don't like it. I don't like it. I point it out whenever I can. I point it out to them in their own boardrooms. Boeing is also on the bailout docket. Sad, but it's true. It's right down the road. I can't help it. Today, it's called for at least a $60 billion bailout of the aerospace industry, where it is the biggest player. It alone, just Boeing, by the way, that's where a lot of this was done. A lot of this. It alone wasted, blew, and incinerated $43 billion in cash since 2012 to manipulate up its own shares until its liquidity crisis forced it to stop the practice last year. And its shares, they have not done well in the last year. You can look at the history yourself. Pull it up on your Robinhood app on your phone. You'll see. If Boeing's current liquidity crisis causes the company to run out of funds to pay its creditors, it needs to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Under the supervision of the court, the company would be restructured. All the good parts would survive. The bad parts would be fire-sailed off, and they'd probably be absorbed by other profitable companies, with creditors getting the company and with shareholders likely getting wiped out. Too bad, so sad. Better than the taxpayers. Boeing would continue to operate throughout, and afterwards they would emerge as a stronger company, and they'd have less debt, and hopefully an entirely new executive suite and board that are hostile to share buybacks and won't give in to the heinous clamoring by Wall Street for them. No one could foresee the arrival of the coronavirus and what it would do to the U.S. industry. I get that, unless, of course, you read my book, Charm of Favor. Then, of course, you would have seen it. I wrote it in 2018. You would have got it. But there's always some crisis in the future, and companies need to prepare for them, to have the resources to deal with them. A company that systematically and recklessly hollows out its balance sheet by converting cash and capital into share buybacks, often with borrowed money because money was cheap, and it's still cheap. Interest rates, prime, are down to zero. To distribute value to the shareholders or unlock shareholder value, or whatever Wall Street billionaire ideas being hyped at the time, has set itself up for failure at the next crisis. And the next crisis is now. The eventual costs of enriching shareholders recklessly in a way that used to be illegal must not be inflicted on me. I didn't do it. You didn't do it. You don't deserve to have your debt, your tax debt, increased because of Boeing. Let it go bankrupt. The solution has already been finely tuned in the U.S. Delta, it's already been around. United, American, and then other airlines already went through Chapter 11 bankruptcies. They work. All these companies are still around. The airlines continue to operate in a manner where passengers couldn't tell the difference. The airlines were essentially turned over to creditors. They were restructured. And when they emerged from bankruptcy, they issued new shares to new shareholders. And in most cases, the old shares became worthless. The new airlines emerged as stronger companies until they started blowing it again with their stupid share buybacks. It ain't legal, so stop it. Companies like Boeing and GE, any of the airlines, any company that blew this now sorely needed cash on share buybacks must put the ultimate cost of those share buybacks on the shareholders and unsecured creditors, not the taxpayer. The way I look at it, they already got their Christmas bonus because those share buybacks, they made those executives rich. rich beyond compare. Now, maybe those guys are retired out. They took their money and they ran to the beach or to their 10th house in Austria or wherever. Flew to New Zealand, their private jet, and landed into their private airport. And all that was paid for was stock that they sold during the share buyback agreements or procedures, done with the cash that you paid them for airplane tickets. And now you're going to have to pay it again as a tax. In other words, companies that buy back their own shares must be permanently disqualified for bailouts. They got to be. Though they may qualify for a government-backed DIP loan in bankruptcy court if shareholders get wiped out, because those proposed taxpayer and Fed bailouts of these share buyback queens, it's just not right. It isn't right, and it should be stopped. I hope beyond hope that President Trump sees this, that he listens to this program tonight, and he takes action. Will not let these companies that have been buying back their shares for the last 18 years, or at least 10 years, turn around and get a bailout from the taxpayers. It's just not going to happen. It shouldn't happen. And by the way, I could use the $1,000, so don't be late on sending that out. I didn't buy my own shares back. I've been working 17 hours a day for a long, long time, and so is everybody out there. This is the Revolution Radio Network. This is the America Free Radio Studios and X Squared Radio, and I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, saying peace, Earth Explorers.